Hello everybody, hope you're all doing well. My name is Steven and this is the Storytime channel. We've got a couple incredible pro-revenge stories, so let's jump right into our first one by PJMurphy, The Long Game. This is a long story, so settle back and relax. I love this sub, and I have taken to asking friends about great revenge stories. This one comes from my boss, who lives in the small town where it occurred. To set the stage, many decades ago, Barney and Betty immigrated from Europe and bought a farm. A few years later, they had kids and sponsored Wilma from the old country as a nanny. She met Fred, a local boy, fell in love, and got married. Wilma stayed on as the nanny, and Fred worked as a farmhand. Their kids and Barney and Betty's kids grew up together, and it was pretty much a big blended family. Years go by and Barney and Betty decide to sell the farm fields to farmer Frank, but kept the land the house was on. They made enough off the sale to build a nice new house and rezone the property lines. They broke the lot up into two parcels, one for the new house and one for the existing house, which they gifted to Fred and Wilma as a recognition of their years of dedicated and loving service. Both houses shared a well and a septic field. More time went by. Barney and Betty passed away, and their house was inherited by their son, Bam Bam. Fred also passed away, and Wilma stayed in the house. She was an angel. Everyone in the town knew and loved her. She was like the town's grandmother. She was active in the church and liked nothing more than crocheting booties for anyone in town that had a baby. Sadly, Wilma passed away too, and her house was inherited by her daughter, Pebbles. She was well established in a nearby metropolitan city and made the decision to sell the house. And so it begins. To give you a better idea of the setup, here is a rough diagram. The parcel for sale is the yellow bit, which backs onto protected park land and is bordered by Bam Bam's land and Farmer Frank's fields. It was purchased by a builder from the city, which we'll call Richard. The name suits him. He wanted it as a country getaway as he already had a place in the city. He got approval to improve the place, and his plans were to convert the barn into a multi-car garage with a man cave and an apartment in what was the loft. He started by tearing down the house with plans to replace it with a bigger, more modern house. The house was torn down and the new build was started. The lower part of the yellow represents a very narrow driveway. Between that driveway and Farmer Frank's field was a drainage culvert, so the contractors started parking their vehicles on Bam Bam's lot. Bam Bam asked the contractors not to do it, but they didn't stop, so he approached Richard and the conversation didn't go well. Richard was an entitled big shot, dealing with what he thought was a country bumpkin. To give you an idea, Richard once went to the local diner and asked for the wine list. He was aggressive and disrespectful, and this pretty much set the tone for all future interactions. Bam Bam had enough. These contractor trucks were tearing up his ground, so one weekend, he built a fence along the border between his house and Richard's. It wasn't a complicated fence. He just got a buddy with a post hole digger on his bobcat, sunk posts, and strung planks between them. This caused no end of trouble with the build. There was no room to park in the yellow for the contractors without getting in each other's way, and they couldn't park in the driveway, which was only wide enough for one vehicle at a time. Contractors were pissed off. They had a long walk from the road to the build site and had to carry tools and equipment back and forth. Either that or take turns dropping materials, waiting hours for the carpenters to finish unloading the lumber so that the plumbers could unload the pipes. Richard was furious and came stomping over to Bam Bam, demanding that he dismantle the fence. Bam Bam told him to go to heck. Then a day later, Bam Bam saw that someone had removed some of the fence and the contractor trucks were back on his land. Okay, thought Bam Bam, let's play. The following weekend, Bam Bam irrigated the area where the contractors were parking. Irrigated it long and continuously. He probably had to get a water delivery to make it happen, as the well had a limited capacity. On Monday, the first contractor to arrive turned off Richard's driveway to go through the fence and immediately sank up to his axles in mud. Did I mention that Bam Bam owned the local service station and knew every tow truck company within 100 miles? As it turned out, everyone they called was too busy to pull the truck out, and they had to call a tow truck from the city almost 2 hours away. You can see how the relationship between Bam Bam and Richard became somewhat less than neighborly. Time went by and Richard's house was completed. It was a low-maintenance setup with interlocking brick over the compound, tall hedges separating Richard from Bam Bam. They kept out of each other's way, but they certainly weren't pals. Richard's kids would come up on the weekend and have a party now and then, but Bam Bam put up with it. One issue that arose was when Richard decided to fill the small swimming pool that he had installed. This drew the well dry and caused some sand to be pulled into the water treatment equipment. When Bam Bam approached Richard about the cost of the repair via email, Richard basically replied that it was Bam Bam's problem. The same when the septic holding tank needed to be pumped. Bam Bam offered to split the cost of the pumping, and Richard refused to part with a dime. Years passed and Richard decided to list the house for sale. That's when Bam Bam made his move. He cut the water and capped the septic line leading from Richard's house. Then he informed the real estate agent of what he had done. Well, that induced a thunderstorm for sure. There's no way Richard could sell a house that had no water or any way to dispose of waste. He couldn't build a septic field on his property, it was too small. He approached Farmer Frank to buy some of his land, but was rebuffed. His only option would have been to install a septic holding tank, but the only place to put it would have been right in the middle of his compound, and septic tanks can be aromatic. It would also have meant removing the in-ground pool. Richard tried to argue in court that he was entitled to access to the well water and the septic field, but Bam Bam won, arguing that the Wilma and Fred were given water and septic as a courtesy, and that there was no contractual obligation to provide Richard either well water or septic access. There was nothing in the deed to Wilma and Fred that could be grandfathered in, and Richard's emails refusing to pay for maintenance to either system was the nail in the coffin. The property sat vacant and unusable for months. The price dropped through the floor, and the few people that expressed an interest in the property approached Bam Bam with varying offers of cash to restore service. Bam Bam declined. No offers were made to Richard for the house. Finally, Richard did receive an offer from a numbered corporation, an offer that was about a quarter of the asking price. As is, with a statement that the buyer was aware that there was no water or septic service to the property. Without much choice, Richard accepted the offer. And that's how Bam Bam bought himself a beautiful modern country home at a steal of a price. He reattached the water and septic in an afternoon and moved his furniture down the driveway and had the numbered company negotiate with himself for an arrangement for perpetual use of the well and septic, thereby jacking the value of the house by a factor of 4. Later, if he decides to sell it, he'll be making a massive profit. Bam Bam now enjoys a country paradise and is the social king of the hill in his town, all because Richard decided to be a Richard. Obviously, you know what Richard is long for, so if you didn't catch on to that right away, you can go ahead and fill that back in. So, a question for you is, do you think Bam Bam was being unreasonable when they tried to constantly So my question to you is, do you think Bam Bam was justified when he was blocking off access to his land, whether it be the fence or the irrigation? If so, why? Let me know in the comments down below. And our final story of the day is written by TheMaleMaryPoppins. Break my phone? You'll pay for the damage. I was always the kid people picked on at school. The girls would spread rumors about me and the boys would harass me nonstop. See, I'd always known that I wanted to be a nanny. I loved babysitting and looking after kids, so it seemed like a natural career choice for me. I made the mistake of telling this to a girl who I thought was my friend, and she proceeded to tell everyone at school. As this was perceived as feminine, I instantly became the target for bullies. There was one boy who loved to terrorize me. I'll call him Jack for the sake of the story. Jack was awful. He would follow me home whilst throwing things at me, vandalize my schoolwork, call me disgusting names, steal my stuff, cut my hair in class, etc. I was terrified of him. It got to the point where I couldn't sleep from the fear of having to deal with him at school the next day. I blame him and his friends for the anxiety I had, and still somewhat have to this day. I reached breaking point not long after Christmas when I was 15. My family never had a lot of money, but we got by. My mom had saved for ages in order to buy me my first phone. No, it wasn't the newest model, but I didn't care. I was so grateful to have my first phone, and a little guilty that my mom had gone without her new Christmas outfit and had put off fixing her own phone to buy it for me. Once the schools went back after Christmas break, Jack found out about my phone. He took it from me and proceeded to read through my messages, making fun of me for the lack of contacts and telling my mom I loved her. Then threw it to the floor and stomped on it in front of his friends. I was furious, upset, and devastated this tick had destroyed something that my mom had worked so hard to buy for me. I started planning my revenge. I knew through the grapevine that Jack's mom was a stay-at-home mom. His dad had a well-paid job and his mother was quite happy to stay at home with the kids, 4-year-old twin girls. I also knew, however, that she didn't get to go out much as Jack would flat out refuse to babysit and she was pretty picky when it came to who was allowed to look after her kids. I used to babysit her friend's little boy and was pretty good at it, if I do say so myself. However, for my plan to work, I had to babysit Jack's siblings. I made a few comments here and there to the little boy's mom about wanting to get a few more babysitting jobs so I could save up some money for my mom's upcoming birthday. As luck would have it, the lady recommended me to Jack's mom since it had been so long since she'd been able to go out with the girls. For the next few weeks, I'd go to Jack's house with the other little boy I was babysitting and look after his little sisters. Despite Jack's awful attitude, his family were all pretty nice. His little sisters were an absolute joy to look after. Jack wasn't usually in the house, but when he was, I could see that it killed him to have to be civil to me. His mom would have flipped out if he had been horrible to me in front of her or his little sisters. They'd have quickly ratted him out. Once I decided enough time had passed, I put my plan into action. See, Jack was one of those creepy kids that liked to brag about his adult magazine stash in his bedroom. This made him cool to his friends. Never understood why, to be honest. Anyways, every time I'd babysit and put the little ones to bed, I'd sneak into his bedroom and search around. I know this is a massive invasion of privacy, but I was a stupid 15-year-old kid and I couldn't take his bullying anymore. I eventually found his stash and made a mental note that they were in a bag in his closet. I'd been observant those few weeks, so I knew that Jack's mom and dad had an unopened bottle of vodka in the fridge. They didn't drink a lot and it was only for when they were going to parties. One night, once the little ones were asleep and Jack was out with his friends, I went to the fridge, opened the bottle of alcohol and tipped about a quarter of it down the sink. His parents could afford to buy a new one, by the way. If they couldn't, I'd never have done it. And snuck up to Jack's bedroom and hid the bottle in the same bag as his stash. His parents found out about it not too long after, and after Jack accused me of taking it, they showed up at my door. They weren't angry because they still don't know who had taken it, so they asked me some questions. I denied everything, but was polite and even offered to help them look for it in case it had been misplaced. They thanked me, but told me that it was fine, they'd find it. And oh boy, did they find it. I was called over the next day to take the little ones to the park for an hour or so in order for them to have a talk with Jack. They didn't like arguing in front of the twins. It frightened them. When I got back, Jack was in his bedroom. If the noises were anything to go by, he was crying. It turns out that he'd ratted himself out. His parents found the bottle of alcohol in his room along with his adult magazines. His mother hated anything like that as she found it degrading to women. She humiliated him by gossiping to the neighbors about his unhealthy obsession with sex. He denied everything and accused me of planting the alcohol there. When asked why I'd do that, He ratted himself out by saying that it was payback for him breaking my phone. His parents flipped out. They'd had no idea their son was such a bully. They took away his phone, grounded him, and made him sell his game console to pay to get my phone fixed. I had been saving up the money myself for a few weeks. His face when they made him hand me the money will stay with me forever. His parents questioned me about the bullying, eventually informing my mom as well. I'd hidden it from her and told her I dropped my phone. He got into a lot of crap at school after a few other kids came forward about the bullying they'd endured at the hands of Jack and his friends. A few of them, including Jack, got suspended. Jack's parents even made him go to the door to apologize to the people he'd tormented. I was reluctant to take the money at first, as it was way over the amount it would cost to get my phone fixed, so his parents compromised and told me to take enough to at least cover the repair cost. Needless to say, with the phone repair covered, I managed to get my mom an awesome birthday gift. So I'm not going to say that planting the alcohol and tipping it out was the right thing to do, but I also think he's plenty justified for doing it. Does that make any sense? I'm glad that after having to put up with all this tormentation and bullying and just such incredibly bad and negative experiences, they were able to get their phone fixed and get their mom something that they deserved, because it sounds like their mom was a great mom. But besides that, if you enjoyed the video, please consider giving it a like and subscribe and turn notifications on if you haven't. All of those things help the channel out so incredibly much. So no matter what you did, whether it was commenting, liking, subscribing, thank you all so very much for supporting me right here on the Storytime channel. That said, I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll see you all next time right here.